But let's get into our top story for the night, which was the most recommended by listeners. I don't know why. But let's talk Boogie2988 versus Frank Hassle. Yes, Frank Hassle. It's not... Apparently, there was a thing online where people kept on calling him Frank Castle and thinking it was a Punisher Twitter handle. No, it's Frank Hassle. And the feud that has apparently been going on... I'm not even going to go into the details of this feud. It is stupid. In fact, I don't know about you guys. One of my biggest complaints with Boogie... I get it. He gets tons of abuse, and he lets it roll off his back, except recently, where now he feels that he has to respond to every single detractor. And, I mean, we've all heard the saying on YouTube, right? Don't feed the trolls. And that's what he basically goes out to the bridge with a big roll of bread, candy, whatever you think, and just drops it in there. And he's doing that consistently all freaking year, and this is no exception. He decided to get up in Frank Hassle's face, which then prompted Frank Hassle to go out to his hometown of Fayetteville, Arkansas. Is that right? Fayetteville, yeah. Arkansas? Okay. I always want to say Fayetteville, Alabama. It's not, I don't know why. But
like Fayetteville in Alabama, that's why.
Yeah, but I always want to say that, and it's not right, because I know Boogie lives in Arkansas. So he goes out to Boogie's hometown, starts doing everything that he could possibly do to aggravate Boogie, which then gets Boogie going off, and then he starts threatening, well, I'm going to go to your house and I'm going to troll you, which in turn makes him start making threats of, okay, you come to my house, and I will be taking a gun to you to get you off my property. You think that's the worst that it got, people? It got far worse. Because Keemstar got involved. And this is actually one of those times where I can honestly say this wasn't Keemstar's fault. Keemstar brought both of them on, where Frank just made himself look like just some asshole on the internet that wants to give Boogie a hard time. And Boogie usually is better than this, but he actually was threatening to kill Frank Hassle on DramaAlert. Now, I know that Romney's going to start correcting me here, but a lot of the statements that Boogie made really make it hard for the self-defense argument or for Boogie's a victim argument. Because, frankly, when he says, you come to my house and I will end you, it's very hard to stand on Boogie's side and say, yeah, you did it right here. In reality, Boogie should have just stayed the fuck away, and he should have just shut up. In fact, one of my big pieces of advice, and I think the rest of my panel is going to agree with this, Boogie, get off your phone. Somebody take his phone and break it. Or hide it. I don't care which. Get off the internet. Just get off. Because what resulted from that was Frank made good on his word, came to his house, and out comes Boogie with a gun. His roommate's gun, to be exact. It wasn't his. Which I think actually creates issues for gun owners that live with mentally ill people and creates problems for them. I'm not sure about Arkansas's code in that regard. But he comes out, aims a gun at him, keeps getting harassed by Frank. Boogie then fires a warning shot, which gets a neighbor's attention, and then the neighbor tries to get Frank out of there. And the police have gotten into the situation. They have talked to Boogie. They've actually chastised Boogie because he actually did break some state laws when it comes to being able to defend his property as well as being able to fire a firearm that wasn't his. But yeah, this situation got crazy. And frankly, no one looks good in it. I'm sorry. I've seen people on Reddit and Twitter that are saying, no, Frank's totally in the right. No, he's not. No, he's not. Nobody's in the right here. But Romney looks like he has a few things to say, so I will go ahead and get off my high horse here.
Well, I will agree with you that Frank definitely is not in the right here. And looking at Hassle's track record of specifically trying to antagonize people in person while recording it on a camera that's strapped to his head, so much so that he actually got booted off of YouTube and has since been uploading his content to BitChute.
Well, he got banned off Twitter for a while there, didn't he?
Well, according to the article we're going off of here, which comes to us from Vice, it only mentions that he was banned off YouTube and has been uploading his content through BitChute, which is more of a right-leaning content site. And honestly, looking at this, yeah, I get the whole, oh, don't feed the trolls, but I'm sorry, Frank crossed the line by showing up at his house. And yes, while Boogie did violate a number of state laws, since Arkansas is one of the states that doesn't have castle doctrine, which is where you get the terms of stand your ground laws regarding the self-defense argument.
Well, it's a weird deal, because I actually saw people look into it. They have a castle doctrine, but it doesn't follow a lot of the tenets of it.
Actually, I looked into it a little bit further. They technically don't, because if they have castle doctrine, that basically means that it is enacted in law. The closest they had is that there was a bill to enact a stand your ground law that was in the state legislature in 2019, but was killed. But the same legislator who proposed it is hoping to bring it back at the legislative session in 2021.
Yeah,
so
it's confusing.
They don't.
Yeah.
And so in this case, I look at this, I'm just like, yeah, I mean, say what you will about the whole don't feed the trolls thing. When someone literally comes to your home unannounced and is specifically trying to antagonize you,
I agree.
Yeah. Like, I mean, yeah, I may not be as familiar with Boogie, but at this point, I'm just like, if I were a DA in this case, well, yeah, I may have violated state law. Given that it was only a warning shot, I would view, okay, you probably should have, used your own firearm or gone to the proper channel, but I wouldn't necessarily level any charges against Boogie because it was a clear case where Hassle is clearly the aggressor here.
The way that we understand it is Boogie is pending as far as charges is concerned, because the cops did look him in the eye and say, yes, you did break some laws. In fact, they basically kind of, because we found this out later when Boogie, after getting interviewed by the police, he went on to Monday Matt's show and did a thorough yelling at Monday Matt too, but that's beside the point. Basically chastising him for even coming outside with the gun. He really should have just called the cops. He should have stayed inside and he should have just called the police.
Yeah, and that's something that even Boogie himself admitted in the Vice, in a statement to Vice, saying, "Hey, I probably shouldn't have opened the door. I probably should have handled things differently." But when you're, but I get it. When you're afraid for your life, when someone is repeatedly trying to harass you IRL and is threatening to come to your home, naturally tensions are going to run high. I mean, granted, we could all do a better job of keeping our emotions in check. But here is a case of where most I can see Boogie getting would be at most maybe a fine and maybe having certain privileges, maybe kind of being on probation is most I can see, is having to pay a fine, maybe being on probation, depending on how severe they want to make it. But again, if I were the DA, I would look at this like, okay, well, you did violate these laws, but we understand that it was moderately justified, and given that he fired a warning shot and didn't actually try to kill Hassle, that's at least something that's the case of, okay, well, you at least showed enough restraint to not actually kill him. I mean, yeah, he would still be punished. I would push for something like probation, which doesn't necessarily mean a jail sentence. It just means, okay, probation. That means you can't have firearms for this set period of time. You can't have this, that, and the other for set period of time.
Well, those specifically would probably go to the roommate whose gun it was actually, because the roommate let Boogie do that. And so at that point, that's all the gun penalties would go to the roommate, but Boogie would still be under close
Boogie
watch.
Would still be on notice and likely would still be put on probation.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not familiar with Arkansas's weapons laws, but I'm just saying if I was either a judge or the DA, those would be the kind of charges that I would go for. The sentences I would go for would be like, okay, maybe have him pay a fine, put him on probation, maybe make it so that way if he does try to buy a gun in the future, well, then he gets flagged saying, hey, you clearly have a history of doing this. Again, something like that, because this is one of those cases where, yeah, things could have gone better, but again, I still feel a bit bad for Boogie because it's a case of, hey, this person literally repeatedly threatened and then carried out on his threat. I mean, any of us in that situation, granted, yeah, it would be better to not open the door and call the cops, but I can't say I blame him, because when you're afraid for your life, you don't necessarily think straight.
No, and I get that, but I still actually do have a legitimate issue with Boogie here, because a lot of the antagonistic behavior that came out from Frank was because Boogie just kept going at it. Like, I actually saw a few people who also had to deal with Frank coming out and saying, look, all we had to do was leave him alone, and he just goes away, kind of thing. We don't respond to him, we don't do anything. And Boogie used to do this stuff. Like, he would actually... He would respond to some of it, but like for most of his detractors, he would just ignore it, kind of thing, and maybe go and instigate something himself. But in this case, like he did everything that he's recommended to so many other YouTubers not to do, and I get it. He's not in a good place right now, but at the same time, that's why I'm saying, and I think Romney and me could be in agreement on this. Get off the internet, Boogie. It's not helping you. It's really not. You're creating problems for yourself. You're consistently shooting yourself in the foot. And what I would actually recommend, because I know, after having to research this, people have tried to take Boogie's phone away. And unfortunately, he likes to pester about it endlessly. And so then his support network eventually caves. I almost want to say, like, okay, support network, give it to somebody else that Boogie doesn't know for like a month. He doesn't know where the phone is. He can pester all he wants, but he can't see shit on it. Because that's the problem to me right now with Boogie, is if he actually had a month off where he wasn't worrying about what people were saying about him on Twitter, if he wasn't doing live streams on YouTube or anything like that, he actually might be able to recoup a little bit. He might be able to rest, refresh, and be able to do that necessary reboot that we've all had to do at some point with social media. Like, I do it yearly at this point, like at least once or twice yearly. Just turn everything off, and I feel better for it. And Boogie would feel so much better if he just did it. I'm guaranteeing you he would. But he's not willing to do that. So that's why I'm saying, like, you know what? I'm going to have to be a parent here for a second, and I'm taking away the toy. I get it. His parents were not good, but this is what I do to my own kids. If this was like if they were spending endless amounts of hours on Twitter, I'd be taking it away. I'd be like, nope, this is not where your focus should be. So, Alex, what's your take on the Boogie situation?
Yeah, I don't actually have a lot of sympathy for Boogie here. Yeah, Frank was there being an asshole and yelling at him, but I don't know.
And I want to make it clear, we're not on Frank's side here either. Frank is an asshole, and he shouldn't have done that, and he knew better.
Yeah, but what kind of kills any potential sympathy I have is the fact that Boogie did fire a weapon. Yes, he didn't fire it at him, but he fired it into the air, and he could have still hurt somebody else.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's one of the things the police had to clarify with him, too, is like that bullet does come down.
It's the #1 rule of firearms. You don't point a weapon at anything you're not prepared to kill. Mm-hmm. And he did that. And he fired a shot. He could have killed somebody else. He could have hurt somebody else. And he's goddamn lucky he didn't. So, you know, yeah. Now, if the time I'd say to pull out the weapon and be on your guard is if Frank was actually getting too close and getting to the point where he's about to break down the door, break the window, and get in the house. Yeah. But as far as I can tell, he was standing out.
Yeah, if Frank was actually invading his home, he'd have every right to defend himself. I think even under the tenets of Arkansas law, he would actually have a little bit more of a leg to stand on here. But Frank was just knocking on the door and being an asshole.
You know, if you have a problem, you call the cops. That's it. You know, and the roommate.
You call the cops, and here's the thing. While he's sitting there yelling, you don't think the neighbors are going to notice that and call the cops? And if enough calls go into the department from that area, they're going to send somebody faster because they're kind of done with getting all the neighbors calling. It's definitely something I've seen in my life. We've had people like come out at 2 a.m, you know, screaming to high heaven and making sure nobody can sleep, and then the cops get called to get them out of there. But yeah, that was the better way to handle it.
And now he's put his roommate on the hook for this because it's his roommate's gun.
Yep.
And, you know, maybe he should have sent the roommate out to deal with it or try and get rid of him. Not actually point the weapon and try and shoot at him. Warning shot or no warning shot. But either way, now you put your roommate on the hook. I don't know why his roommate has a gun at all. I mean, whatever, it's his right to own a gun, but but the fact that is Boogie does have a history of mental illness. It's no knock against him. It is part of who he is, unfortunately.
That's a question to me. Like, why isn't that locked up in a gun safe or something like that, and why does Boogie have access to it? If Boogie if Boogie has access to it, that's not good.
By the sound of it, though, the roommate was probably there, so I wouldn't be surprised if the roommate handed it to him. So that was poor judgment on the roommate.
So at this point, it's sad that this kind of put the roommate on the hook, but the roommate did have choices here, and it sounds to me like he let Boogie have access to the gun, and that's a no-no. You can't do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's my 2 cents. Well, remember, guys, basic firearm safety, you don't point the weapon at anything you don't intend to shoot. And that's what Boogie did, and that's a big mistake.
Uh-huh. And unfortunately, I think this is going to... I think Frank is getting a certain level of backfire from this, but I also will say I'm kind of happy that Boogie is too, which is starting to make it real for Boogie. Like, he has to actually get off and be able to go recoup. So I hope he takes advice from this. Romney, you think you look like you've got something additional to say there?
No, I had a thought, but I lost it.
Okay. But yeah, so that's kind of the way that this thing ended. I don't think that we're going to have any other issues. I think Frank went home after this situation. I don't even think he talked to the cops. It was just Boogie that talked to them. Because a neighbor came in and basically shoved him off or got him off the property.